Thanks for listening to Fluff and Crunch, where we talk about the connection and sometimes disconnect between system, setting, and story in tabletop RPGs. Thank you for listening. I realized that, like I said in my previous episode last week, that I was going to be gone for a couple of days, and I thought, gee, I'm going to have to record Wednesday's episode sometime later on Wednesday when I have time. I don't know. And then I realized I have time right now, so why not just record the episode now before I go away for a couple of days so that there's an episode back on our regular publishing schedule. So that's what I'm doing. And this one's for the GMs, much like David Lee Roth at the beginning of Ice Cream Man. I believe it was the last song on the second side of their debut album, Van Halen's debut album. He said, I'm going to dedicate this one to the ladies. Well, I'm going to dedicate this one to the GMs. I am going to give you permission to end a campaign while it's going well. In fact, I'm going to give you permission to end a campaign that you are running when you feel like it. And when you present the desire to do that to your players, they look at you and they go, that makes sense. I gave you permission to do that. A little bit of background and some thoughts on this whole issue. In my experience, most GMs are forever GMs. There is something, for those of us that have the gaming gene or whatever, some of us have a minority of us have the GM gene, and the vast majority of people have the player gene. And some people end up with those with the GM gene, like me, end up being the forever GM. And some people look at this begrudgingly, and others accept it with, a sense of reservation. I embrace it. Chris and I talked about this. We've actually talked about this a few times over the last several years of the show, that both of us actually enjoy GMing more than playing in general over the long term, because GMing for us is more stimulating because we have more on our plate than just our character. And I think that goes some distance to explaining why I'm the forever GM by choice. I'm fine with it. But one of the things that I think happens sometimes for GMs is that we get this sense of either when we start a campaign, and I'll explain exactly what I mean with the C word here in a second. But when we start a campaign, I think a lot of times, at least in my experience, and folks I've talked with, there's this sense of, I'm going to run this campaign for a long time. And especially in level-based games, I've experienced this where players will say, D&D, let's just call it D&D. Will we run this up to like level 15, level 16, somewhere in the teens, some epic, high level stuff. And I think that there's a desire among GMs to plot out a story, a plot, a story arc or series of story arcs that will stand the test of time, in that this will provide for long-term play. And a lot of times in my GMing life, in the last 30 years, 30 years since I came back to it in college, and years before, so let's just say 45 years. Let's just go with that. That'd be easiest. Oftentimes when I sit down to, we're going to start something new. New characters are going to be made, and we're going to start off with a new storyline, maybe in a new place. Even if it's the same system we've been doing, there is often this either default, unexamined, or explicitly stated desire that we're going to run this thing forever. We're going to run this thing for the long term. And in my experience, in the vast majority of circumstances or times when we do, it doesn't happen that way. You as GM can sit down and map out using D&D as the example, a multi-level, many-level campaign, story, plot that's going to develop over time and be married to the progression or the expected progression of characters as they become more powerful and they get closer to the conspiracy or closer to the Dragon Lord or closer to the big bad evil guy, whatever. In most cases, life gets in the way, boredom gets in the way, the campaign goes in a direction that you as GM didn't anticipate, and you burn out, or you just burn out. I have found that the vast majority of those stated desires to run the epic campaign end up coming to nothing. Several months, and then it kind of crashes and burns or fizzles out. In fact, in my experience as a GM, I have had 3 campaigns that have been have really gone long term, and I'll say long term is over 6 months of weekly play. So you do the math to break that down, however that works out with your frequency of play, but at least 6 months of regular weekly play. I've had 3 that have gone beyond that, and none of them started out with me deliberately stating, like drawing a line in the sand or planting a flag and saying, this is going to be long term, this is going to be epic. It started off with just, hey, this sounds interesting, either from something that I came up with, or in the case of Pathfinder Kingmaker, an adventure path that I bought. And it just happened. And I can't stand the word organically. It's so overused, but it just, how about this? It happened naturally. Our long-term campaign, the Kingmaker campaign, was well over a year. I think it was like 14, 15 months or more of actual play, regular play, separated into 2 blocks, because we had a couple of months of off when our, real life got in the way of playing our made up crap. So I'm going to put aside that epic, long-running, awesome campaign that a lot of people, I think, strive for and hope for, as being something that I actually don't really think that you can plan for it, because you don't know how things are going to turn out. You don't know how your energy and your creativity related to that original story, whether it's published or whether it's entirely out of your head, you don't know how that's going to play out. The other side of it is you have no idea how your players are going to react to it and how the story is going to evolve over time. So the long-term campaign, let's just put that aside, because I believe that happens most frequently, and it's rare, when it happens naturally. So the other side is when you're running a campaign, and you're planning multiple sessions into the future, I think that there's this assumed sort of perspective by the GM and expectation by players that it's just going to keep going. It's just going to keep going. I mean, maybe you buy a book, like a published adventure, or a module, something even shorter, and you say, hey, let's just run this. And there is the examined or unexamined question of, well, what are we going to do when this is over? There's that, but I have found, talking to other GMs, conventions and otherwise, is a lot of people, there's just this sense, you make characters, you start playing, and the assumption is this is just going to keep going. And so here's what I'm doing. And I said at the beginning, I give you permission to, boy, how haughty of me. I give you permission to end a campaign while it's going well. Now, I don't have to talk about ending a campaign when it sucks, okay? Although I will say this, how's that? I implore you, GM, if the campaign is sucking the life out of you in a bad way, all right? If it's just absolutely draining you, if it's become a chore, and you've talked with your players, and it's just something about that, yeah, end it and start something new. If it's something about the campaign, you running it. But what if it's going well? When is it okay, and when does it actually make sense to end a campaign, and I mean end it, like is done, or shelve it when it's going well or pretty well? And the reason why I'm talking about this, and I wanted to talk about this today, is because I have now done that. I have been running, and the reason why I had to drop this when I'm dropping it is because I need to tell my players first, because some of my players listen to this, and so I can't have them be like, "What the hell is going? You're yanking the rug out from under us." I have to meet with my group and tell them what the deal is, and then so this is old news for them. So, quick background: I have been running Traveler for my group since August of 24. It's now January of 25. So we'll have had about, several months, with time off, Christmas, things like that. Some interruptions for various things. But basically we have been running it weekly. We get together, we play for about 3.5 hours, 3.5 hours every single week. It's delightful. In person, in my garage, which is like so old school. If only I had shag carpet, like as Kenneth Haidt says, like a Peter Frampton poster, but I don't. Um, anyway, we've been playing regularly, and I've got links actually in the notes and in the end at the very end of the this video. I've got some links to some videos that are related to this. But if you're listening on the pod, excuse me, I have links to some of the episodes where I've talked about Traveler recently, because that's based out of this campaign we've been running. And I've been thinking for a while that the campaign that I'm running for Traveler is a published adventure. I started it out actually with a single published module. I then came up with, I ran a second one. So I ran 2 published modules. I then came up with my own story. And then I'm running this published, more like mini campaign at the beginning of what's called the Fifth Frontier War. And it's been going really well. My 4 players who had never played Traveler before, but have been interested in this game, have really enjoyed it. They've really grown into their characters. Their characters have grown. They've grown as a group. It's been terrific. And one of the things a couple of weeks ago, or like a month or more ago, like early December, I was thinking about is, well, gee, this published adventure, Opening Moves of the Fifth Frontier War, and I have a review of that, link in the notes to that, is really good, but it comes to an end. And I was thinking, well, gee, what am I going to do after that? Do we want to run a war military related campaign? Is there going to be some kind of like storyline of special operations or espionage or intrigue or whatever? And I kept butting my head up against this sense of like, well, I'm really not sure. A little side note, in my life right now, I'm busy. I have a full-time job. I have a side gig and a side hustle, and maybe even another one. So I'm busy, and I have a family, and I love spending time with them and so forth. And so I am happier taking published adventure material and riffing on it and changing it rather than creating something whole cloth. And so most of what I've run for Traveler has been published, albeit with my, the inevitable GM variations of that which comes from the publisher. And as we're getting ready to wrap up this Fifth Frontier War Opening Moves book, I kept thinking, this is about a month ago, like I said, what the heck am I going to do next? And nothing came to mind. And my group is varied. I don't think they're overly interested in playing like a military style campaign. And I'm ambivalent on whether I want to run that or not. And so I got to thinking, and I suddenly went, wait a minute, why don't we shelve this? It's going well. Nobody's complaining. I'm having a good time. They're having a good time. Why don't we shelve this while the energy is still there? Which seems counterintuitive, to me at least, until I thought about it more. Why don't we shelve it, move on to something else with the intention of playing it for a short period of time, a few months, and then come back? Now, here's why. And I'll have presented this to my group already, so they'll be good with this if they're listening. There is this terrific sandbox campaign that Mongoose Publishing put out several years ago called The Pirates of Drinax. And I'll put a link to the page on Mongoose Publishing's site about it. But sandbox to the GM, the red flag is a happy red flag, but the red flag is if it's a good sandbox, there's a lot of material. A lot of material you probably need to read and become familiar with before you endeavor to run this thing. And so, like I said, it was around early December, and I started thinking, I really am not entirely sure where to go with this next. And I could squeeze it to death. But instead of doing that, wait a minute, I'd really love to run Pirates of Drinax. However, I'm not ready to do that because there's a lot of reading I would like to do. I don't need to do. I could be, slapdash GM, but I want to do this reading. The material is well written. The content is interesting. The adventures that are presented in the gigantic murder weapon slipcase that I have is good. I want to be familiar with it because I want to run it well, but I'm not ready to. So I went, wait a minute, why don't I shelve this campaign for a period of time in order to give me the opportunity to do the reading and think about this Pirates of Drinax and move us to it. Same characters, advance the timeline about a year. I've got a reason. Not a reason. I've got an idea as to how I'm going to take their same characters now and advance the timeline and move them to this other area of space, which is actually moderately far away from where the campaign is right now. If I have some margin, space, time to read and prepare, I don't know about you, but as a GM, I get energized when I think about the next big thing. Whether it's the next big thing is a different campaign, a different system, a different setting, something new, or the next big thing within what I am running. I get excited by that. It's stimulating to think about the possibilities of the different. I want to move the campaign forward in time within the game world. And I need time personally to read. Like, I need a couple of months because I have a life. I need to read the stuff so that I'm prepared enough so that we can really just knock this Pirates of Drinax stuff out of the park. I can have fun running these things for them and seeing how they react, and they can enjoy it, and it can feel good because I know what I'm talking about. So what I decided was, and I'm going to throw this at them tomorrow night when we meet, because we probably have 2, maybe 3 sessions on the outside, is that we are going to go, and I know they'll go with this because my players are super easy. They're easy like Sunday morning. They're just hip to playing interesting stuff. And I know Eberron, D&D's setting from the 3.5 world. And by the way, in my mind, Eberron is the best D&D setting of the, outside of the original, maybe Greyhawk, or some no-name world. It's not even a world, it's just modules. My, by a long shot, my favorite setting for D&D is Eberron, and I'll do an episode on that. And I know it really well. I went right over the edge in 3.5, the 3.5 era for all things Eberron. I own all but one of the book, all the game-worthy books for Eberron 3.5 I own, and I know virtually cover to cover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a couple of months. I have already a story in mind, an arc in mind for Eberron 3.5. We're actually going to use D&D 3.5. I don't want to convert a damn thing. I don't want to fart around with, nothing. I thought about Pathfinder 1st edition. I hate 5th edition. I loathe it. I've come to the point where I never want to play 5th edition again. So I'm not going to run 5th edition Eberron, which I think personally is a watered down version mechanically and story-wise of the version. 4th edition is the edition that shall not be mentioned other than just saying 4th edition. So I thought really hard about maybe using Pathfinder 1st edition. I'm like, screw this. We're going to run this for 3 months at most. Maybe 8 or 10 sessions, 12 sessions, something like that. Why bother putting in the work? Let myself run on, not run on autopilot, but let me use that which I know about the setting to run this adventure as easily as possible so I have mental space in the amount of time I allot for gaming stuff to do the reading for Pirates of Drinax that I want to. So I am going to dump that on my players tomorrow in the form of a high quality sales pitch that I'm sure they'll take. And because they're such good people, good players, I am certain that they'll be hip to it. They all recognize that I do the vast majority of the work. And by the way, GM, if your players, and you shouldn't expect your players to genuflect to you or something like that, but you do the overwhelming majority of the work. And consequently, there should be a little bit of grace from your players who accept that because you do most of the work. When you say, listen, I need a break, or listen, I'd like to do this, they should go, okay, yeah, that's cool. We get it. I know my players will do that. So what we're going to do, here's the plan, is Traveler's going great. I love it. I'm loving reading these books. I picked up several on PDF from drive-through. Yay, Traveler. And listen to the episode from last week about why Traveler is so great. 3 things about Traveler that are so great. Links in the notes. What I will do is I will run this Eberron adventure that starts off in Sharn, the city of towers, and involves Dosk, the criminal monster gang from the monster nation of Droam. And if you don't like my pronunciation, so what? I will run this adventure for short campaign arc for probably, I'd say, like I said, about 3 months. I have it already, it's sketched out. It's so easy because I know the setting so well. And I figured no conversion. We're just going to run 3.5. It forces me to go back and refamiliarize myself with 3.5, which actually is fascinating. Some of my players, I know for a fact, are not familiar with. They came in like through Pathfinder or 5e. And so we will run that. And I have a clear endpoint for that story already in mind. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be a railroad. I just know, I already have it arranged. I know when that story is going to end. And when that story ends, I have a deadline for myself, which keeps me honest and working. I will read the stuff that I need to for Pirates of Drinax, and we will go back to Traveler. So it is entirely possible to shelve a campaign and bring it back. And GM, I give you permission to do so. When the energy is high, or at least good, you can say to your players, hey, we should do something else for a period of time because I'd like to do this. I'd like to prep for something else. Or you don't even have to have that. You can just say, you know what? There's a lot of good games out there. Why don't we try something else while we're in a good way? So, and therein then is a bit of advice. I say, there are a lot of good games out there. There are a lot of terrific games out there. You should give them a try. You stick with the same thing. If it's working, hey, if you've got that, if it naturally happened, you have a good long-term campaign, great, stick with it. But if you have that itch, Mr. or Mrs. GM, to try something different, lead your players there. And it's okay. You're not there to deliver a service to them. Okay? You're there to have fun with these people who hopefully are your friends, or at least with whom you're friendly. So I give you permission. You can stop it, or in this case, per my description, you can shelve it for a very clear reason, and then with a promise of coming back to it in the definite future. So anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, GMs. Those of you who have, hopefully you haven't got, I've been here. You get so burned out that you're just like, oh my gosh, I have to stop this. I can't do this any longer. Hopefully you haven't gotten to that point. Or if you have, you're starting to recognize when you're headed down that road. I would love to hear your feedback and your thoughts on this. How do you shelve a campaign? How do you decide to like, okay, the story isn't fully over, but we've gotten to the end of a chapter, figuratively. How do we say, listen, or how do you as GM say, I'd like to move out of this and offer something else. I'd like to run something else. I would love to hear your feedback on this. So thank you. Make sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, give it as a stocking stuffer, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, thank you. Have a great day. Thank you, as always, for listening to Fluff and Crunch. You can join our Discord, you can subscribe to the podcast, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, all through the links in the show notes. Thanks again. Have a great day. We look forward to talking with you.